for the second quarter 2026 commentary. We may have to rename the channel because we've given up on the squirrels. Maybe we'll call it Star Academy based on our backgrounds. But so Andrew, I think we'll dive into forecasts and some other things now. But what are you seeing as the big things that are catching your attention in the economy over the last few months? I know we talked a lot about AI in the past. Is that still your number one thing, or is there other things on your radar?
Yeah, I mean, AI is obviously like it's hard, like it's almost like you know that's the thing because it's so massive. It's hard to look past that when like when the headlines are all these companies investing hundreds of billions of like just absolute mind-boggling amounts of money into AI. It's hard to look past that.
Yeah, we picked the wrong profession because didn't they give one person like $1 billion package to do AI, agentic AI or something?
Oh, the pay packages are outrageous. Yeah, $1 billion in AI world is like chump change, right? Like, you have to get to $1 trillion like Elon to really make it big.
So what do you think it's all going? Because you don't see anybody slowing down. You see people investing in data centers. Now we're starting to realize, as we talked about last quarter, the data centers actually eat up resources for real people. Like the power is going to go up, the water consumption is going to go up, and people are protesting saying, I don't want to pay double water bill and a double power bill. So they're building out this infrastructure. And then even in my previous call at work, we're trying to say, hey, what do you do with AI? Right? So there's like a disconnect. What do you see as kind of a connect the dots type thing where you're saying, okay, it does make a lot of sense to build out this huge infrastructure. We're kind of going through this wave, kind of like the internet phase and industrialization phase where the economy is fundamentally changing. Now they're introducing this AI, but how is it applying to the real world and how is it useful? I know you went to a conference recently. Did you glean any kind of insights about, okay, this is a clear direction and this is why they're investing so much in the infrastructure and the chips and everything?
Yeah, so the sense I get is that a lot of the like tech level execs are just kind of scrambling because like they really don't know what is going on. And so there's kind of the disconnect where everyone wants to sound really smart about AI. So they all have, they use all the buzzwords. But there's kind of a disconnect between like what execs think is happening and then the people who are actually using it are doing with it. It seems like the execs are thinking that they're going to save a bunch of money and drive their earnings per share higher, but the people using it are just basically using it to create a lot of cool stuff. And so right, I guess that's the token maxing and stuff like that where it's driving up the cost. So I think that there's kind of a massive disconnect in terms of what execs want to happen and then how it's actually playing out. So
I think what you're realizing is it can do the job, but it may do the job incorrectly and at times a disaster. So there's one level where can AI do the job? Can it replace people? Yes. And then what is the success rate? I think they're finding out it's a little bit poor. So maybe the job market will go, let's say in 5 years when things improve with the technology where all the humans have the oversight jobs. We're in banking, so we're used to having these oversight jobs, right? So every job will be an oversight job. Nobody will actually do any work.
Well, I mean, that's not true. So like one of the things that I kind of am a little bit cynical about, it's like a lot of jobs, like people aren't actually doing anything. Like, I mean, and so like this narrative that you can automate or get robots to like do nothing. Well, like I think it's kind of a misunderstanding of like what's actually going on in these massively bureaucratic corporations.
You got to keep your voice down.
So I think that like it's hard to automate pointless committee meetings, right?
Yeah.
So like I think that like one of the big issues is probably going to be like corporate structures and governance itself. In that if you do have these genius level hyper efficient workers in a data center or whatever, it seems like it's actually the corporations themselves that might need to be restructured. So like you're still going to need people to actually do stuff, um, but you don't like what the actual efficiency gain might be is in getting the AI agents and stuff like that to streamline a lot of these corporate structures, and so that might actually be one of the reasons why the execs are trying to push like step on the brakes on the AI is that it's not so much that you aren't going to need people to actually do stuff, but you probably always need people to do things in one way or another or whatnot. But when you start saying, well, actually, you can just collapse all these bloated hierarchies down, and a lot of super high-paying jobs are just not necessary in a kind of organization that's structured for AI. You might, but like the screams of C-level people losing their jobs might be a little bit more, might be a little bit louder than the screams of the junior analysts.
Well, that's a good point, and I think you mentioned that. I don't know if you mentioned it on a podcast or anything, but you mentioned that people need to restructure the whole corporation around AI rather than AI comes in and makes things more efficient and it's the same old thing. But guess what? The bells and whistles come on. It really is where, and you might want to expound on it because we didn't talk about it too much, but you might so you might want to say, oh, sorry about the background. So, the question may be, how do you restructure corporate America so it's really utilizing AI to the fullest, right?
Absolutely. So I think that's the big thing is that like everyone thinks that you can just take your current structure and sprinkle a little AI on it and it's gonna be magic. I feel like that has a 0% chance of working. Maybe a -% chance because that's just not like it's just not gonna work that way. You have to like redesign and see like think like okay, suppose you have a structure where decisions are being made by agents. They don't need a PowerPoint presentation. They just need the underlying data. They don't care about the font size of your PowerPoint deck. Like that does not matter anymore.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
and so like having a very fundamental restructure um, it kind of just seems inevitable. And so in that lens, it almost seems like it's easier just for startups to kind of um, like come in and kick the pants off a lot of the big companies. So I wouldn't be too surprised if what you end up with is a lot more companies because there's like so many more things you can do with
Yeah,
AI.
that's interesting.
It's just they're a lot smaller. Like you don't need as many people per company. So that's another thing where like the whole employment picture could just be changing where you're seeing a lot of like solo I guess they're calling it solopreneurship and whatnot where you have like one person companies because all you need is a cloud subscription now, I guess, to start to do a startup. Um, and so it could just be that there's this massive flattening, which could be kind of cool to see because a lot of the corporations have gotten very big. And so to the extent that now it's more efficient for individual people to do things than interact kind of more of a P2P kind of environment to get things done around the economy instead of these like massive kind of huge corporate behemoth inefficient structures interacting in the economy. It could actually work out, but yeah, trying to sprinkle a little AI on your process and thinking that's going to work is kind of a joke, but everyone's
Yeah,
going to do it though. So I mean in the short term like at the conference, like there are tons of consultants who are trying to like help you implement AI and stuff like that. And, I mean, there's gonna be a huge job boom, and people are gonna make a ton of money just playing that game of coming in and saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to help you implement AI." I mean, that's gonna be another huge industry, kind of, you
well,
know.
these are excellent points because, as an economist, what we're taught is that, in market economies, you should kind of converge to perfect competition. where goods are kind of homogenous and there's no really any kind of monopoly. But what you have in a large part in America, some way due to the relationship between large corporations and large government, you basically have a few large companies dominating. But when you look at what AI has the possibility of doing is it can cut the fixed costs, it can cut barriers to entry. So let's say you just couldn't afford hiring a lawyer to get through all the regulations at the state and local level. You have some regulations in place done by corporate lobbyists where it's like, wow, I have to do a lot of work just to compete with a Walmart or this and that. And then it could be, well, I just go to AI and it tells me what to do, and it's fairly accurate, right? So
Mhm.
I think, you know, there could be a golden age where there's just more competition. And I think there is a case study, which is YouTube, right? So, you know, you and I 10 years ago had a lot of great conversations at work, which gave me the idea to do this on YouTube. But when you go to YouTube, there's just a huge marketplace of ideas and people doing stuff. And as we discussed earlier, AI slop, right? But that's because the technology has allowed you to compete as a creator or as
Mhm.
a commentator or something like that, an economist or whatnot, or investment strategist or whatnot. You can compete with somebody on TV. We can compete with Jim Cramer. We can say Jim
Yeah.
Cramer is full of garbage and we don't need to be on NBC or whatever. You know, we can do our own thing and it's just as legitimate. So
Well, I think it's kind of awesome because now I think it's almost flipped where, you know, I- like you hear all these, you know, kind of very filtered corporate speak presentations, and it's just like, dude, this is all stale. Like by the time stuff gets filtered through the corporate
yeah,
stuff, you're like, this isn't any good. Like in order to get the actual good stuff, you have like it's on YouTube. It's on like that's where all the good new stuff is in terms of like economic ideas and
oh, I've
uh
found a ton of
so
good stuff. I mean, a
so
lot of
like
smart.
yeah, I mean, in my view, it's almost like I now view, you know, but you know, there's some people I watch and somebody that's like that's my source, like Goldman Sachs research. I think I just throw it away. It's garbage. Like at best, it's like three weeks stale because they have to go
Yeah.
through all their, you know, before they publish something, it has to go through probably 15 different layers of compliance, and so well, by the time it's out of date, like who cares?
Yeah, because the markets are moving quick. In fact, you know, I came across this channel. I think it's pretty big. It's called Maxonomics, and I was mentioning this. And
Hmm.
so he was basically saying something that I had known as an economist for a while is transportation is a huge indicator of where the economy is going to go. So all the things like the Trump policies in terms of tariffs and in terms of getting pledges to domestic investment by international investors. I think it's like starting to blossom, right?
Hmm.
So we'll see in a minute. My macro forecast is not too optimistic for next quarter. It goes up after that, and he was making a very strong case that the way it works is back in the Clinton days, the globalization was saying, okay, we're going to open up markets, and most economists will say that's great. You're going to get more production, and then what happened over the decades, and Jeffrey Miron did a good paper on this, is basically showed it worked too well, right?
Yeah.
So the GDP of the world went up, and the United States GDP kind of flattened. So there's a gap that's being closed, which is why we don't mind traveling to the far corners of the earth because it's actually decent now, right? Because the
Yeah,
economy's even
there's
gotten
Starbucks
better.
everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, you got Starbucks and McDonald's and it's comfortable. You got nice hotels, but we wouldn't do that 30 years ago. We'd just probably go to Europe. So it has worked. And then the thing Trump came about and said is, well, you've also, because of the nature of economics, you've gotten your labor overseas and our labor class is suffering. So we're going to reverse that by saying we're going to demand that other countries open their markets, and we're going to be a little bit more careful about having other countries dump their stuff in our market, right? And so there's been kind of a leveling, but also what people forget when they talk about the tariffs and the packages is he got a lot of commitment to invest internally into the United States for
Mhm.
manufacturing, right? And so that guy Maxonomics did a very good job saying, well, you can see by the transportation movement that goods are being transported out of the Midwest, where the manufacturing renaissance is happening, into the coastal areas. If it was the opposite, like the previous global paradigm, you would see transportation going from the coastal areas into the United States to distribute goods from overseas, right? So again, didn't read it. I didn't read it in a Goldman Sachs brief. Clicked on YouTube, 3 clicks away, does a very good analysis, right? So
Yeah.
you do have this idea of, okay, you can see a lot of naysayers saying AI is going to be the ruin of everyone, but who likes their job, right?
Well,
Right?
yeah.
Wouldn't you rather work for yourself and make more, right? So
Yeah, there's two sides. So the point you brought up earlier about like the resource issue, where like you can, like companies, some of them, I think like the tone is shifting because um, the idea where they're like literally firing people so that they can invest more in physical data centers. You can like literally see the capital shifting from humans to the AI robot world. I can see how that is causing a backlash, but on the other hand, um, like yeah, who likes their job?
I mean, it's the jobs are I had a situation where my dad hated his job, so one of my
Mhm,
goals was to have a job I enjoyed, and so
mhm.
I've had a long career. I'm close to the end, and I actually enjoyed the job, but I had a you remember one of our, I think you were there when he was there. One guy, I won't say anybody's name, right? We'll keep it anonymous, but he was actually pretty smart. So he went in front of some quants about, I don't know, close. I guess it was close to, well, it was about 15 years ago. And he just said something that, is kind of true because I had been working for 20 years up to that point anyway. But he said, like, if you get 20% enjoyment out of your job, you're doing good. So in other words, what he was saying is your job is beneficial, right? But there is just a large part which is redundant. There's a large part which is kind of asinine at times, but like bureaucratically driven because we work in big corporations, right? So
Yeah,
I think that's a lot of truth to that, right? And
yeah.
so yeah, I think there may be a renaissance where people kind of say, look, the the barriers to entry say I could be an entrepreneur or I could do something similar and work in a corporation, and there's a level of indifference which is not that it's not a big jump to be on your own versus being a big corporation, because I think up until now it's like, well, you would never, like if you start a bank in Georgia, for instance, it would probably cost you minimum $3 million capital, right? So
Mhm.
that's kind of been the banking regulations, right? The average person says, well, I don't have $3 million in capital, right? But if you have an internet bank, there may be some different rules depending on where you put it, where you incorporate at, right? So
Mhm.
there's a lot of interesting things going on, and I think there's a lot of opinions that are wrong on both ends. Too optimistic, like the Elon Musk, which is we're going to have this Star Trek utopia where nobody has to work, versus, oh, well, nobody can work because there are no jobs,
No,
right? It's like two different extremes, right? Like you don't have to
yeah,
work or you'll never get to work, right? So,
yeah, yeah. It is kind of crazy. I don't know. I forget where it was originally first published, but there's I guess now infamous chart of the implications of AI. It's either the Star Trek utopia, all of humanity goes extinct, or you get like 0.4% GDP growth, and you're like, this isn't like none of these are really like that. It's like kind of an absurd word.
yeah,
um,
yeah.
like wow.
People have to remember that, in spite of what they're saying, and it's just basic economics, just sit back and think about it. There's population growth, and there's resource constraints, and there's technology constraints, right? So what they're selling is AI is this infinite technology. Like you can make infinite amount of productivity out of this AI. It'll be perfect, but not
Okay.
reality. Just look
Yeah.
at, they need to get in the reality out of the tech world and go into reality. Like, oh well, how does my hamburger get manufactured, right? I know you had the great idea 10 years ago about the burrito machine. Do you remember the conversation
No,
about the burrito
no.
machine?
What was my burrito machine idea? No.
Remember we were talking about the machine that could make 300 burgers an hour?
Okay.
And we used to go to Moe's and we were saying, what about a burrito machine? So it
Yeah.
instantly makes.
Oh yeah.
But that's not reality. Just watch them make a burrito. It takes a little while, right? So
Yeah. There's always physical constraints. I think that the recent kind of increase in the like token cost is really kind of an interesting thing where now people are starting to find out that humans might actually be cheap, cheaper than AI. Kind of, it, if you try to figure out how much it actually costs. I actually asked AI, like if you were to hook up our brains in terms of like compute power per energy cost, because like our brains are actually relatively efficient, like what the equivalent like kind of compute cost you could rent out this theoretical GPU at. And it was like it came out, obviously making tons of assumptions or whatever, but it was actually kind of implying you could rent out your brain at like $1 million a year kind of thing. So um,
I
it
think
is
you're
kind
right.
of yeah, something like crazy like that. So I mean, I'm sure that fast forward 5 years or whatever, AI will totally blow past anything humans can do. But right now, like our brains are still like given the energy efficiency and stuff like that are actually not bad for real world stuff compared to even um, the the high end AI solutions. Um, Once you factor in all the like practical like costs of like energy and stuff like that. So,
Well,
so,
I
so
think
there,
that. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, interrupted
yeah,
you.
yeah. No, I just think it's interesting that like there are always constraints. So even if you have this like theoretical, frictionless on paper design of the world, reality always finds a way to not make it work quite as planned.
Yeah. Well, I think the only way that it'll work even close, because I think there's going to be more and more protests at a local level. I think the argument in Georgia has been the eminent domain thing. Like people are saying, oh, Georgia Power just said they're going to take our house, right? Because what they're doing is they're trying to, ramp up for data centers, which requires a lot of resources. I think the only way out is to build a nuclear infrastructure, but that probably takes about 20 years, right? So that's something that's probably without regulation, right? But it'll take a long time. I know there's some ideas about small nuclear units, thorium reactors, salt reactors, but I don't know if that will be enough to mitigate. But there's going to have to be some nuclear infrastructure. I just don't think there's no way you can build a data center and power it with today's technology and material constraints at a large scale, right? So I think that is the sort out they're going to have to do. And you used to work in that industry, so what's your opinion? I mean, you were kind of right next to it, right?
Well, yeah. So the interesting thing about the U.S. power industry is that, like, for decades, everyone's been kind of clamoring that, like, we need to invest more in the infrastructure because, like, it's not sufficient if there is any kind of ramp up in demand. Like, for almost fortunately, for the past, I don't know, 20 years or whatever, total electricity demand has been kind of just middling along, if you will. All kinds of different sources, outsourcing, population growth slowing, stuff like that. But we've kind of gotten lucky in that total demand for power has just kind of flatlined because people have been saying for decades that there's been this like massive problem of lack of investment because like just the returns on it are terrible in a world where you aren't allowed to like raise prices. So I guess it all started with the Enron scandal where like people were manipulating prices because like the demand is inelastic, right? The price goes to infinity. It's not like a normal distribution kind of market where prices go up by 2%. It's like if there's a supply issue or supply demand mismatch, prices go like vertical, like
Yeah.
and on the flip side they go negative. And so if you're a power company or whatever, it's kind of like you lose money all year, and then like one day there's a freak event, and you make you like profits for the whole year that one day.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like how you made money. But after Enron, like price gouging, is kind of not allowed or whatever. So then, like if you take away the ability to price gouge, well then you're just losing money all year basically. And so nobody's going to do that, and nobody did it. And so just like nobody really wanted to invest in that kind of just environment where you can't earn a profit really, I guess. And so yeah, like it's one of those things, like people have been predicting that there'd be a huge shortage or problems of needing to invest more for years, but until something happens, there's no incentive to get things done. So in one way, the AI boom is good, and that it kind of brings light to the issue that we need to at least think about, rebuilding the grid, uh, investing in all kinds of alternative energies, nuclear, solar. Like I know there's some people who are like saying, "Oh, we shouldn't have solar, or we shouldn't have wind," but I mean the reality is we're going to need a bunch of energy. So like we need kind of all you can get, kind of thing. And it's actually really interesting that China has gotten so far ahead of us on solar
Yep.
power production.
And also
And
nuclear.
so
I think
yeah,
they're
nuclear
building out
too.
nuclear too.
And so like fundamentally with the whole AI build out, at some point like the constraint is energy. And if you start projecting out, if we don't start aggressively investing, as the limit goes to infinity, whoever has the most energy will win. And right now that looks like China.
Yeah.
And so that is a kind of uh, I guess in some ways it's good that we're at least starting to to invest heavily in that now.
Yeah.
But
And
better
I
late
think,
than never.
and there's a connection to what you're talking about to, things that, I'm a Trump supporter, but I don't really support him as much on the military stuff that's been in the last 6 months. But I think there's an economic reason for it in terms of the petrodollar, right? And also in terms of securing energy, right? So I think a lot of, there's a lot of connection points. One is the AI ambitions. The second one is the fact that the federal debt is huge, right? So they have these things like are competing, and there's a synergy there to say if you have alliances with, reformed Iran, if you want to call it that, which is more U.S. sympathetic, and a reformed Venezuela, which is more U.S. sympathetic. Maybe they'll start trading in petrodollars again. That helps the debt, right? Throw in stable coin, big stable coin cheerleaders. That eats up some of the debt, right? Because nobody wants to hold it now. Nobody wants to hold the U.S. debt now. And then you do the another thing, which is like maybe you can get some favorable energy conditions to support your AI ambitions, right? And like to your point, if you look a little carefully at what's going on with Iran, also kind of kick China in the nuts, in terms of
Yeah,
oil supply,
there
right?
definitely seems to be like I don't know like what all the thinking is, but I would imagine if you're running some kind of game theory kind of thing with like trying to play out different moves of how the U.S. China long term rivalry works. Something like this, where it doesn't really affect us, but it affects China a whole lot more than us.
Yeah, yeah,
Like you said, it's kind of like a kick in the nuts. I don't know if that's the factor, but I don't think it hurts
yeah, yeah.
the decisioning process.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of things going on. It's hard to figure out what's going on, in terms of, why are they doing some of these actions when some of these geopolitical threats have been around for decades. It's not new.
Mhm.
It's not an emerging threat, right? So I do see a connection point that, and we can kind of get into the federal debt. There's no way you can do anything with that federal debt that's realistic, other than monetize it, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
you just print the money, but how are you gonna end up doing it? Where does the money go, right? if the money goes overseas in petrodollars or into stablecoin, you avoid having inflation at the the grocery store and people's daily lives, and you kind of avoid being voted out of office, right? So I think there's this delicate act. It's just unrealistic to say they're going to raise taxes and there's austerity.
Well,
There's like no chance, right?
well, you could also argue like the outrageous money that everyone is spending on data centers. Like that's not the worst. So the debt has to go somewhere, right?
Yeah.
That's not the worst place to put it, right? So I know a lot of it comes to, oh, the ROI is negative on it and yada yada. But like, if you yeah, the money has to go somewhere, and there's so much of it. Well, that's not, yeah, sure. Have fun with these big computer games. Yeah.
Oh, you thought of something I never thought about. That makes a lot of sense. So if you can just say, okay, we're going to print the money, and the old story goes is you print the money, and whoever gets it's going to put it into the bank, and then the bank is going to make out loans. There'll be a money multiplier and stuff like that. If you can direct those funds towards investment, that's the only kind of credit that will actually grow the economy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, some will argue if you increase credit card debt, that'll grow the economy. Realistically, not, right?
Yeah.
You're just transferring, spending from the future to now. That's all you're doing for the consumer. But if you build a capital base in this infrastructure, that would be something that would be anti-inflationary. It would be positive, because you would be saying, I'm going to print some money. It's going to go through the banking system or whatnot, maybe directly in the markets, through margin accounts and stuff. And then it's going to be like, oh, we're gonna make it directly to plant and equipment, directly into, translate into jobs, because the robots cannot wire, a nuclear plant or wire a data center, I should say. So I think you hit upon something that might be part of the strategy, right? So there's a heavy emphasis on data centers. We say, well, why is that? Because we don't even know if AI is going to be fully adopted, but they're building out this huge infrastructure, right? And then it's like, okay, they're also inflating away the debt. So you get rid of the debt, and then you might build something productive in the future, unless they fall into the China trap. The Chinese kind of do that, and they just build a bunch of houses, for instance, right? And then nobody lives in it, right? So hopefully they build a bunch of data centers and it actually is used, right? But
yeah. It's kind of like maybe it's a rational bubble where it's like, well, the debt's getting like nobody wants to hold this stuff anyway. Might as well just put it into the data center that might get used.
yeah, and there's also a reason on the flip side that stable coin. There was Tether; it's been around for a long time, but all of a sudden it's like, oh, let's really promote stable coin. I haven't read the latest one, but I think it's more of a, and this is the kind of thing we looked at in July of last year, because I read through the Genius Act. It's like, yeah, you can hold that, but I don't think you can make it kind of like this bells and whistles type coin to use. Like, oh, you get all these advantages. But I think now people are talking about, can you give them rewards, right? Kind of like this money, not money transaction system. So I think they're trying to make it more widely adopted, because, overseas folks are dumping the federal debt because it's going to it's going to be devalued through money printing. And so they're saying, well, who's going to eat it? So it'd be like, oh, let's put it in stable coin. And then people trade it, and it's like, oh, it's just like $1, but you get a little reward here, that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah. Like when I saw that, when the Genius Act came out and started reading it, I was like, oh, this is just a kind of like a marketing thing for T-bills that trying to generate some buzz to hold the government debt, right? Because it has to be backed with basically the government debt or whatever. So it's like, oh, well, I mean, I could kind of see the appeal on the government side, right? Like, oh yeah, sure, we're not gonna hold back anyone who wants to create this vast potential market for our debt. But yeah, sure.
Yeah, and that's like, in Congress things get caught up, and I was even watching one video about how they put all these good bills out, but they always get killed. But somehow this one made it through the House and Senate pretty quickly. And it's like, oh yeah, if we don't do something, nobody's going to buy our debt. And So that went through pretty quickly last year, you know.
Yeah, it's almost funny.
Uh, well, I think it's the time to take a look at the forecast, and then I want to get your opinion on it. Let me see. Do I know how to share? It's always different from your work computer.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, here it is. So with all that said, I think, am I sharing?
Yeah.
Oh, I am. Now we have
Yep.
this logo, but we cannot be sued because it does not exist anymore. So
Kind of
I
like
thought it was
the
funny,
old,
just what we
like
did.
like the Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, well, that'll be our next one. So I think, you know, what I had before, the it looks like there's going to be like another bit of a, a drop in growth. And I think I already
Well,
caught.
yeah. So I think like so the Q1 at 2.5. I'm guessing like that like your model might be picking up that we. I thought I saw that the realized GDP came in a little bit less than expected. So your
Oh, it's at
model
one
might
and
be
a
kind
half.
of
It's at
yeah.
1.5. So it might be
Okay.
picking up a little bit late, but
Yeah.
I think things are going to kind of go on the downhill a little bit, at least from the aggregate measures. And you can always argue, you know, what are the aggregate measures? But I think this one is, you know, usually I put the red line is where the last actuals were. So I think that's the last actuals. Now, do remember that I'm doing year over year change.
Oh,
So
okay.
this is not the
Got it.
headline, because what they do is they do the quarter over quarter change and
Yeah.
you make it annualized. So I think that red line means that's the last actuals. But I think
Mhm.
the next move is it's going to actually, I don't know the exact number. I should look at the numbers, but I think it's going to be like in between the 2 and the 2.5 range. And now the model is, and I might have to redo the model. It looks like it's going to bottom out on year over year basis around the third quarter, but then you see a lift to 2.5%. Now, what does this translate to in terms of the headline? I don't quite know, but I think just qualitatively, you just kind of see a lift going into Q4 and beyond, right? So I think that's a high growth rate. I don't know what that translates quarter to quarter, but I
Okay.
don't know how accurate the model is going to be going forward, because I think things are actually going to be higher than that. But I think what it did in terms of last actuals, which is Q1, is
Mhm.
pretty decent, right? So um, and then I think consumption is also going to drop correspondingly. That might will have to do with AI or people just being nervous they'll lose their jobs. And then capital formation, it did dip, but I think it's going to go back up. So I think you can look for things to look pretty optimistic going forward after this. And the way it works, obviously, is once they get the capital in place, you get more output. So you see this spike before the consumption and the GDP do, right?
Mhm.
So you kind of see this lead and then it'll be high. Now, is this realistic to say you're going to have this high year over year range? Probably not. You know, these models are pretty basic statistical models, so they're just going to kind of go to a long term number, right? But I kind of look more at the last 2 or 3 quarters, the first 2 or 3 quarters of the forecast to say what it's going to look like, right? So I think it's going to be somewhat optimistic on the capital formation side and be optimistic after that. The labor market, I think it's going to be in the negative range. Now, I think the model was off on this one last time, but it's going to be kind of in the negative range. But then it's going to, this is not good for us, but I think it's going to break positive in 2027, right? So I think people are just trying to figure some of these things out with AI. And I see a lot of videos saying a lot of it's due to people just over hiring during the pandemic or post pandemic, and they're just kind of correcting that and then just pointing the finger at the robots, saying it's their fault, right?
Well, so on the labor market, one kind of aspect that I feel like might be getting a little bit less publicity is that it seems like, well, like a big story is the no hiring on the um recent college grads. But I also think if you look, there's probably been a higher than normal kind of, a lot of the baby boomers just kind of sunsetting their careers earlier than they would have otherwise.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like on the front end and the tail end. I think you're seeing, some of the decrease in the labor force, whereas the prime age is still kind of has a relatively high kind of participation rate, but I do think you are starting to see, that like let's say you're 60 years old, you're like, I don't want to learn AI. I'm already vested in all my stuff. Like I'm just gonna kind of ride it out. I think that you are starting to see some of that on the tail end kind of pick up as well too. So
That's good insight. And there's a couple of things like I'm Gen X, but if you subtract, if you add 3 years of my age, it'd be baby boomer, right?
mhm,
So like at the beginning of Gen X. So those people are in their 60s because I'm 58. I'm close to it.
mhm,
And they are going to retire. And like you said, there's a huge reason. One is they're kind of retirement age anyway. Second of all, the stock market's
yeah.
exploded. So if they were invested in the stock market, they probably can retire, right? And then also, to your point, you might just look at your job and say, "Oh, I got to learn all this new AI stuff. Forget it."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're like, well, I already made all the money on AI by owning the AI stocks. So, well, why do I need to learn it? I already won that game.
Yeah, that's called capital versus labor. Capital owners versus laborers, right? And he's like, I'm a capital owner now. I have stock. I don't need
Yeah.
to be a laborer anymore, so I'm going to leave, and then we'll see how the economy adjusts. I think just the labor market is pretty stagnant, I would say, and I think it's mainly because people are just trying to see how all things sort out. Like, so in other words, when you hire someone, it's quite a journey to get them hired, for all these legal and bureaucratic reasons, and then it's quite a journey to get them fired, right? And I've had to go through this process before. So you don't want to say, well, I'm just going to hire and then oh, guess what? We don't need all these people. Well, how are we going to get rid of these people, right? And the only way you can do it without all kinds of bureaucratic and legal things you have to go through is basically say, we're just going to have a reduction in force. We're going to get rid of this department. We're going to reorg, that kind of thing, right? So I think you can only use that so many times in a short period of time. I don't think you can just do it on a continual basis. So I think people are pretty reticent to hire someone and knowing that, oh, the landscape, I hired this guy 1 year, the next year, we realized his job was redundant or could be done pretty efficiently by AI, but now we're stuck, right? And we have this
Yeah.
larger cost. So I think when things kind of settle out, and I think literally since we started doing this the last 6 months, things are starting to settle out. So in other words, when we started doing this in December, we're like, oh, AI might take all the jobs. Now, 6 months later, we're like, well, AI is really screwing up, and we've seen this at work. They're trying to incorporate it in our daily work, and nobody's really being a fast adopter to it. So I think maybe 6 months down the road, people will say, okay, we figured it out, and now we have a better idea of who we need to hire and what we need to do, right? But those are
Mhm.
excellent points. So as my children go to college, I'm semi optimistic that the job market will be pretty good when they get out. But it's going to
Well,
probably a rough 6 months to a year for people graduating this year, right?
yeah. So like one thing I haven't understood is like that. Oh, we aren't gonna hire all the like kids fresh out of college because of AI. It's like no, but those are the people that are gonna know how to crush it with AI. So like I would think you'd want the kids out of school who like already have like five agents like doing all their homework for them. Like
Yeah, that's right. They're super
like
efficient at having other people do their work in school, right? So why can't they do that at work?
yeah. So like I think there's probably gonna be a shift of like I guess for a while I never fully understood this narrative, but it was like oh they're gonna like get rid of all the like low paying highly like low paying smart people are not gonna be able to find any jobs. Um, No, like those are the ones you want to hire with new technology. So I don't know. I think like there might be a little bit of a flip where it shifts from we're going to get rid of all the uh, kind of young, fresh out of college kind of grads to we're going to start going after the the more middle of the pie, the people who are just kind of sitting there who are twiddling their thumbs kind of thing.
Well, that's a great point, and that's exactly what you were talking about in the beginning, right? So it's kind of like there. How is the organization going to absorb AI? You may need to just reorganize and start an organization based around AI, right?
Yeah.
So square peg round hole, and then maybe in the next 6 months they start saying, well, we need to make the peg is round, we need to make the hole round.
Yeah.
We need to make it fit, and that's kind of the opposite of what people are trying to do. But I think we're having parallel experiences where we're being asked to say, how can you fit AI into your workflow? And you're realizing it can probably fit, but it might make some people's jobs disappear. And then here's the big problem I see, because I've messed with AI and, can it build a model and this and that? And you need some pretty strict oversight. So I think that's what they're finding with the coders, right? The coders are spending more time correcting the AI code than if they would have written it themselves, right? So this is a big problem. If you have AI come in to do the thing that is probably best suited to do at this point, and you have to have that much oversight, then there's two ways forward. You go say, no more AI, or you say, okay, we're going to use AI, but we're going to have to hire more people to review their code. Right? So you're kind of in a weird place here. We found a very good use for it, which is it can translate code from one language to another. And my brother-in-law said this to me probably 6 months ago. It was very good at doing that. So that's one ace in the hole for AI. But there's a lot of things they'll have to say, well, if you get it to do a job and it does a great job 99 times out of 100, but the last time it does it, it completely screws things up and causes disasters. You have to put some oversight on it, right? Because they've had this happen with fast food, right? Like AI saying, oh, you must have ordered 100 drinks, or you must have ordered 10 million chicken nuggets, and they literally try to execute the order. So yeah. So I think it's a shakeout. People are having to figure out what it can do, what it can't do. And like you said in the beginning, you're not going to get rid of the human element to a lot of production processes, right? So for prices, I think now this is the GDP deflator. I think you're still going to go over a 3% clip, but you see a kind of a slow descent to lower prices. And then that thing on the top is just my guess of what they're going to do with M1. Who knows? But I would say that the economy, just to be consistent model wise, will start to grow. So all that investment spending that's happening now and over the next quarter or so, it'll start paying dividends going end of 2026 into 2027, right? So that's good news. I was looking at the forecast. It's doing pretty good. It messed up on total employment, so don't trust it. But it predicted that was going to be a 12 basis point increase, but it was a 37 basis point drop. I use the total employment number because it's counting people, so there's no weird things with the labor participation rate that you have to think about. But yeah, I think it does okay. Now, a lot of this stuff is one step ahead forecasting. So obviously, with econometric techniques, that's the fish in the barrel. It's the easiest one. How this does over 4 quarters is a different question, right? So kind of semi-confident that the model's doing it. But like I told you, I think I'm going to redo the model. I have a lot of suspicions it's not as good as I think it is. So anyway, I wanted to get into this discussion with you. We had talked about through email. I thought it was pretty interesting. So a question I have is a huge federal debt a problem? Right?
No,
So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a problem if you can print your own money, right? Like,
not a problem if you can print your own money, right?
Like
Correct.
that's what, like, people, being like, oh, the government owes all this money. Well, it's kind of just like a smoke and mirror. Like, okay, so we owe, let's say, $40 trillion. Well, okay, you can just, here you go. Here's just on the keyboard. Here's your 40 trillion. Like it's really, so if you look at the other countries like Japan, like they have a problem, right? Like, because we, I guess they have our IOUs for, what is that, like $1 trillion? They're not going to get $1 trillion of stuff back. So
Yeah,
yeah.
you do see the $1 trillion there. But of the federal debt, people forget that there's about 38 trillion, about 7 trillion is the government owing itself. And
Sounds like
that
the
is
government.
that is only a problem if the government has to pay out Social Security and they don't have anything because the other elements of the government don't have it, right? And
Yeah.
then the debt held by the public's about 28 trillion, right? But as I show on the next slide, and it's just something to think through. I don't have a good answer. Is that really a problem, right?
Yeah,
and
it's
I
just
know it's
money
a
we owe
problem
to
in terms of
ourselves.
inflation, but is it a problem if you don't monetize the debt? Is it really a problem, right? Go ahead. Um,
Yeah, a lot of the debt, even, yeah, it's like, well, so one person's debt is another person's asset. So
that's right.
it's just like, okay, like you're almost thinking about it like, well, that just means that people have a lot of money somewhere. um, right? Because somebody has to be holding that, and it's government debt, so it's, they're gonna pay you. So um, yeah, it really, like there's always the doomerism about, oh, we're in debt, that means like the stock market's gonna go down. No, I think it's the opposite. I think it means that it's gonna go even higher.
Yeah,
Right? Like I think people
you're
have
right.
the thinking backwards on that. Like I think it means that there's more money out there because somebody has to be holding that debt, and like like it has to go somewhere. So that's another thing about the debt is like somebody has to get stuck with it, right? So like like it doesn't go away. um, right? It's just that somebody has to hold it. So it's actually like, I mean, the stock market probably isn't the best measure of the economy, but like it's good for things like that because, like, well, which would you rather own, this debt or shares of Google, or it's, well,
Well, and also people forget that, let's say they decide to say, okay, we're going to settle all the debt and we're going to print money to settle the debt, right? Um, the printed money is actually a liability too.
that's
It's
that
just not
too.
interest bearing. It's not interest bearing. So you're just trading non-interest bearing liability for interest bearing liability,
Yeah,
right? And then in a lot of cases, if you get this, intergovernment debt, I don't even know if the Fed's part of this total. It may be. The Fed, when it gets the debt and it gets paid interest from the Treasury, it actually
gives
gives
it
it
back.
back to the Treasury,
Yeah,
right? So, if they wanted to get rid of the interest payments,
they bank all the debt.
the Federal Reserve would just buy all the debt, and they can because they can just print all the money, right? So it's kind of an unusual situation because these congressmen, senators, and representatives, they always have this long speech. We have to be responsible because the United States government's like a household, and you wouldn't run your household like this. No, that's not true.
If I had a household and I could print my own money, I would probably be running it like the government too. I mean,
That's exactly right. Let other people get stuck with the liability that you can create infinite supply of, right? So yeah, it's just interesting, this breakdown that you have a huge amount that's held by the government and the Federal Reserve and foreign corporations. I mean, not foreign corporations, foreign governments as sovereigns. And the Social Security Trust Fund obviously is going to pay it out. The military trust funds and other trust funds, that's a big chunk of change there, right? And it's basically other places in the government are taking their money and borrowing. They basically are
so,
stuck with some debt, but that's to the government, right? So it's government owing government. And then of course we know in banking because of the regulations. They want you to hold cash or government debt. And what's a banker going to do? They're going to hold the government debt, right? So they can get the interest payments. So I think it's interesting that when we think about this, and you think about the little people, quote unquote, little people getting hurt, part of his pensions, that's 1 trillion, right? And then you have mutual funds holding 4 trillion. So of the 38 trillion, you got about 5 trillion. They'll say, yeah, that'll hurt those pensioners or other people that are holding, government debt as an asset. But a good chunk of it is actually the government and foreign corporation or foreign companies, or not companies, foreign countries, right? So it's kind of interesting, like who really gets hurt when you really think about it, right? And then I had this other slide, and I don't have any answers. And this is all stolen clip art, so I didn't make any of this. But if you think about it, like you got the guy here, maybe he's the rich guy, and then you got the pensioner, and then you got the average guy. He doesn't have any. Then you have the welfare recipient, right? You just see a transaction of all these monies here, right? And everybody has a green line in because everybody pays taxes, right? So they're giving taxes, and then they might give Social Security to this guy, right? And then this guy will give taxes, and then I forget. Oh, and then he's going to purchase bonds, so he's going to give money to them, but then he's going to give the interest back, right? And then this guy doesn't have bonds, and he doesn't get transfer payments and this and that, so he's just screwed. He's got to pay the taxes, and then even this person that gets benefits, could be Medicare, Medicaid, anybody, they got to pay taxes on it, right? Maybe not Medicare, Medicaid, but when you think about the debt, like all these people about all these stories, is really just us. Like you can just get rid of this. You got the intra-government piece, and you got the foreign piece, which I didn't put here. You could just eliminate this right here and just say we're just giving money to each other.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I know it's really bad for inflation, right? Because that means what inflation means is they're actually going to pay off the debt, because it's all short-term debt, as you used to talk about at work. It's all short-term debt. They're rolling over pretty frequently. So, the person, if they start monetizing the debt, which means they pay it off with printed money out of nowhere, it's going to hurt because there's going to be inflation and people get hurt by inflation. But if they just decided, hey, we're just going to have this humongous debt we're going to run, I don't know. You tell me. Does it really affect the economy? It does affect who, what kind of goods and services are being created.
Well,
because,
so I think it's an interesting time now where, because of I guess there's been a lot of talk about the K shape, but one way or another, right? Like it's the money's all becoming more and more concentrated. So
that's a good one.
In one way, right? So like if you just give like 5 people all the money, and then you keep giving them more and more money, and they can't find ways to spend it, like we actually have almost an ingenious system where like they can print like a lot of money, and because of our system, because it like funnels it up to the top, it never trickles. Like it might not cause any inflation because like right, like so if you just give Bill Gates another 100 billion, is that really going to cause any inflation? Like stocks will go up, but like in terms of like consumer prices, they probably won't. So I think that like that's a weird situation where the whole paradigm of the Fed is like inflation is in terms of like consumer prices. But if you have a world where like things switch from labor to capital, then the inflation kind of loop goes to capital, right? Like it's not. I get like the typical scenario in the textbooks is you have this wage price spiral thing where like wages go up, and then that causes people to compete for goods, and that causes higher wages. But it seems like that's not going to happen. What does happen though is like you print money and it goes to capital, and then they use that to generate more capital, and you get this like capital kind of price spiral thing. So the whole concept of inflation itself seems to be like a little bit different now as well. To the extent that there is price inflation, I don't think it's like wages. It's probably people spending their AI stock gains. You know.
I think you've totally hit the nail on the head. You know, when I used to teach economics, you would say, you know, inflation is the quantity theory of money. You know, basically, you proportionally increase the money, you proportionally increase prices, given things are static, you know, blah, blah, blah. But here's the huge thing that people totally miss because they label it differently when they talk about it. The prices do go up, but it's asset prices, right?
Yeah,
And to your point, who owns the assets? It's only like 10 or 15% of the people in the United States. So
yeah,
you're
it's
really
incredibly
doing a
concentrated.
redistribution of income when you do that. Now, the difference was like when you had zero interest rates for a long time after the Great Recession, people say, well, this is crazy. You got zero interest rates and there's no price inflation. Well, there was. It was the stock market and housing, right? But they don't count that when they talk about inflation, right? They don't talk about asset valuation. So what's going on is when they had COVID happen, they did the same, you know, set a bag of tricks they always do, monetary fiscal policy. But you did see inflation. You know why? Because this is the rare case the money actually went to the people.
Yeah, people got some of the money, and then prices exploded. You're like, oh,
It just exploded. It's like, you know, these PhDs in economics, you know, I know them personally. They're some of the smartest people I know. But sometimes it's forest and trees, man. It's like, come on, that printed money. It's not some kind of great moderation miracle. You didn't look at the stock market; it's exploding, right? Okay,
yeah,
it's because none of the money went to anybody to buy goods and services. They bought assets. They
yeah,
inflated assets, and the crazy thing that's happened over the last post pandemic is, you know, and you know this because you're in the markets pretty severely. Uh, there's so much liquidity, they're looking for places to put it, and they started buying people's houses. So
yeah,
the only thing the average person had, like this guy, that's totally screwed here. He's just getting taxes taken out. His only source of wealth is being bought by BlackRock. So now you have a K-shaped economy.
yeah,
Now you have, like you just said, this monetary policy and associated federal debt. It's inflating assets, which is helping the top 10, 15%, and it's not helping anybody else, right? So,
hmm
yeah, it's just something that is something to keep an eye on, right? That some of these measures that sound good, they're just not going to be very effective, right?
hmm
So I think I looked at this one, but I was going to talk to you about that later. So let's hide this for a while. I'll
yeah.
talk to you about that offline. But yeah, uh, I think they're obviously doing stuff to get rid of the debt. They have a plan for the debt, even though they don't say it. They're basically going to
Everyone
monetize.
knows what the everyone knows the plan.
Well, you and I know the plan because we're close to it, but the average person doesn't know the plan. They'll be
Yeah.
sold a bill of goods by whoever's talking on the TV or whatnot. But the only way they can get out of it is, you know, and if I was going to throw an M2 chart up, you can see the M2 do kind of like a dip and then it's going back up now. They're
Yeah.
monetizing the debt now. See, they don't talk about it, but they're monetizing the debt now, and they're what's not happening is kind of the explosion in growth they're waiting for because investment spending takes a little while to
Yeah.
get turned into capital, turn into productivity, and that's why you're seeing still a lot of inflation in the goods market, right? You're still seeing it a little too high, but I think, you know, the stuff with the stable coin and the geopolitical moves in terms of moving on Venezuela, Iran, kind of kicking China in the nuts in the same process, it's all adding up to we got to take care of the debt and we got to take care of the debt. I don't know
Well,
how much
yeah.
they believe in the AI stuff, but they
So
got to take care of the debt, right?
so one kind of thing I've always thought about the debt is I know it's like politically hard for the Fed to like buy bonds or whatever. But a subtle thing that they can do is just tell banks that they have to hold more debt and then make it really attractive for them to hold more debt. And you end up with the exact same situation where it's like, okay, the Fed isn't monetizing the debt, but if you basically make all the banks, or not make, but like, you know, nudge them to buy more debt, you accomplish the same thing. So I feel like that's what the Fed is going to probably do is optically, their balance sheet, let's say, might like they might not do the as aggressive. Well, there's going to be quantitative easing just because it has to grow. But ultimately, like it might not be as aggressive as in the past. But I think you will see a lot of banks wind up with a lot of debt on their balance sheet mysteriously, and accomplishing the exact same thing as QE, but in a much more politically palatable way. And so
Well,
that's one of my kind of predictions on how some of it will play out.
well, once again, you've nailed it. And back in the olden days, we were at Basel 2. I've been a little bit away from it. What are we on Basel 10
I
now?
don't know.
They're probably
End
going to
game.
say they're probably going to say, "Oh, we don't want you to hold short-term government bills. We want you to hold 10-year T bonds, right? So
Yeah.
help that part of the yield curve, buy that stuff up." And I think it does need to be propped up. I think the yields are really high now for the 10-year bond.
Yeah.
So and that includes mortgage rates, right? So they're going to be
Mhm.
like, well, how about we go to Basel 17 and you guys hold all your capital in you know 10-year bonds,
Mhm.
treasury bonds, right? So
Yeah.
I think you just totally nailed that. Yeah, they're going to come up with some regulatory change, I believe, probably soon.
Yeah, it'll
Soon.
be some like arcane footnote to some new thing somewhere, but one way or another, you'll see, JP Morgan has like 10 trillion of government debt one day. Like, what? When did that happen? Right? Like,
Right, right. They need consumers, and it's totally going to work out for them, right? Because they make the rules. They just can change the rules and say you got to do it.
yeah.
Um, so any things you want to cover? I think I only have one more topic left, and we're kind of getting close to our hour and a half limit.
Yeah, um, so one topic that I think is a little bit interesting along the AI lines is so this idea of China starting to like dump compute basically on the US. So similar to like how they used to like dump steel and everything like that. Well, I guess there's some suspicions that they're going to use the same policy, but with AI token costs increase, that and you're starting to see some of the open source Chinese models become widely like used extensively in a lot of the startups because it's cheaper. So I think there's going to be this interesting case of like AI dumping, if you will. It'll be interesting to see if like with the Trump tariffs, like there's some kind of reaction to that,
Interesting.
which
Yeah.
could be a really interesting new dynamic in the tariff plus AI world. I think there's a potential that those things kind of merge together. So that's something that I think could be interesting coming up.
Well, my dad has been in my ear about three things. He's like, "What should I invest in? SpaceX, OpenAI, or Anthropic?" Right. So my advice is no for two of the three. Right. So I wouldn't quite go into SpaceX just yet until there's a huge government initiative to go to Mars or something, and that might be close. I don't know. They know more than I do, right? Those the Elon Musk types, and then I just, to your point, open AI, I think they're just going to get screwed by a lot of stuff you were talking about, right?
Mhm.
So they're already going to, I think they're going to start charging $200 for Chat GPT. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be free much longer because
Well,
yeah,
so the game theory of that though is if it's no longer free, then that opens up the Chinese like I'll just start using the
yeah,
Chinese open source models.
yes,
Everybody is right,
yeah.
and so
It's
then
going
that
to get
becomes
commoditized. Yeah,
yeah, and so that opens up the whole like it allows China to just do their typical playbook, but for AI,
yeah.
which is I don't know. I just think I heard it on a podcast about the like if you wanted to really go after the U.S., you'd start dumping AI on the U.S. heavily subsidized by the government and whatnot, and like crash our stock market. Like so.
No, that's
So
a good point. Yeah.
so I guess that you could dive deeper into conspiracy theories there, but just high level, I think it's just the economics of it in terms of like, well, AI is getting expensive. China China's open source models are really cheap and they're pretty good now. They're getting better. They're, let's say, 6 months behind or whatever. But once it gets smarter than 100 times smarter than humans, do we really care if it's 2 times smarter than us or 3 times smarter? Like at some point it'll be good enough. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just think that like that dynamic, especially when you combine it with the tariffs, is then are we going to have like a Chinese AI tariff?
That'll be next. That'll be next. It's interesting you bring that up because I was thinking when I was walking the other day is like the greatest use of AI would be something that's really hard for humans to do. Of course, there's scientific research and stuff like that, going into space, which is very inhospitable. But can it really sustain a consumer market, right? To your point, when you're 100 times smarter than humans, and humans are doing just fine being, at the 1x level, what else can you do, right? I mean, what else can you do? Well, let's say you make a million pieces of furniture, you make a million houses, you have a million times more food. Then what can you do with extra AI? I don't know, but
Yeah.
it can do really hard stuff like figure out things that are, like, oh, go explore, Europa. Let's go send a rocket ship with all this AI and robots and explore Europa. That would be a better use.
Cool.
But obviously, we know if it's not consumer based, it's very hard to sustain an investment, which is just, the forwarding of human knowledge kind of thing, right? So.
Yeah, the payback period on intergalactic travel of thousands of years, you're gonna have a hard time doing a NPV on that.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting. I don't know where it's going to go. I think we got about 10 minutes. We might get cut off, Andrew. But what is your take on crypto? I've been baffled by crypto, and it's of course stablecoin. We know where that's going. But just talk about. I don't know if you have any thoughts on just Bitcoin. So forget about all the crazy little meme coins and stuff, but just Bitcoin, because I think going into like as of 6 months ago, I was pretty solid in my mind. It was kind of a digital gold type thing, but now it's just getting wrecked. Whereas gold
Yeah,
went up, right? So I don't know if you have a take on that. I don't
I
really
think
have
it's
any good thoughts on
surprising.
it.
Yeah, I think it's surprising. I would have thought like with like the geopolitical situation, and everything, and then also in theory, like, so this might not be specific to Bitcoin, but I would think that as AI commerce starts to develop, like they're not going to really care about our fiat system. They're going to want some kind of crypto native type transaction scheme. So I just would have thought that crypto in general and probably Bitcoin as kind of the center of that would have skyrocketed, just given everything that we've seen, but it hasn't, which is to your point. I, I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe it's that like people need to liquidate their Bitcoin in order to fund their AI investments. So like it could be something along
Oh,
those
that's good.
lines where
That's
it's
good.
a source
Yeah.
of liquidity, right? So you're like a lot of people that have Bitcoin, probably have huge gains, and they're like, well, if I want to invest in data centers, like the returns there have been attractive. Like I've seen a lot of the Bitcoin miners kind of change their data center activities from mining Bitcoin to AI. Part of that's probably just get the stock pop or whatever, but um, yeah, it could be that ironically the run up in AI is sucking some of the liquidity out of Bitcoin. That might be one aspect. But yeah, to your point, like with kind of fiat currencies kind of in the toilet, you would have assumed that Bitcoin would have skyrocketed, and like right with the adage like don't hold money during a war, kind of thing, or
Yeah.
like do you want to own Bitcoin? versus the dollar. I mean, even if you're bearish on, crypto, you're like, well, the dollar, currencies in general, just not something you really, or it's hard to get too enthusiastic about.
Right. And I think, what's really interesting is basically if they were to monetize the debt and things would get crazy, then people would start using Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It would actually be more stable than the US dollar. So,
Yeah, well, and at some point you could even imagine like countries wanting their own Bitcoin reserve or whatever, like the central bank's own gold.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I mean, just to stabilize your currency. So yeah, I mean, in terms of the like technology of like which crypto platform or whatever all the AI agents are going to converge on, or if they'll just create their own, like maybe like the super genius AIs will come up with something that's like better than Bitcoin. Like that's one theory I could think of, that like maybe there's an aversion to like investing in Bitcoin if your thought is that like, well, these AI agents are going to come up with their own version of Bitcoin, and that's going to be the thing that is going to go to the moon, So maybe it's a hedging of like that existential, like, as the AI agents take over the economy and have their own currency, you know, what standard are they going to converge on, and that's a little bit of an unknown, which maybe makes Bitcoin less certain in terms of, is it going to be the goal of the future, or is this whatever potential future AI crypto kind of thing that going to be the thing.
Remember a few months back, you sent me the Mott book?
Well,
The Mott.
yeah, Facebook bought it, or I guess Meta bought it.
No way, really?
Yeah, they actually like.
Didn't it prove to be false though? It proved to be the users of the claw bots were basically telling it to do stuff, and then it would appear that the bot was thinking itself. But what you're talking about is kind of happening, but it's not agent to agent. It's sort of person to agent, agent to person, right? And I think that is the future of AI right there, is having these agents, yeah, I think that could be the future of crypto. But to your point, will it be Bitcoin? Right now, the big money management firms, they've built the infrastructure, and some of these trading platforms have built the infrastructure to make this sort of a permanent class of assets. So I don't doubt that. But if you look at the price, it's dropped. I think today it was at 71,000 for Bitcoin, right? Where it's gotten up to like 125 or something crazy like that. And of course, if you listen to Michael Saylor, he's like, it's going to be $1 million a coin. It's going to be $5 million a coin. And he goes through these long arguments about, these abstract academic arguments about it being a special kind of asset. I figured that out. Like, why is it going up and down? I have no idea. Right?
Yeah. So I haven't kind of listened to his in-depth kind of talks about a bit Bitcoin, but it seemed to me like he was kind of in a situation where he was like, oh man, like trying to compete in the software world is hard. I'm screwed. Everybody is screwed because, like not only do you have or trying to compete against Microsoft, now you have, the AI agents that you're gonna have to compete against too. And so it's basically like, what do you do now? And so like his thesis on Bitcoin, it seemed like it was basically like, oh, I'm screwed. I'm giving up, kind of almost. Which was kind of an interesting way of looking at it. It's kind of like that, if you were a small retailer and you saw Walmart and then Amazon come along, the logical thing to do isn't invest more in your business. It's like close up shop and just buy shares of your competitor, right? You're like, yeah, I'm done. I'm cooked.
Hilarious. Yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah. So I don't know what's going on in the crypto market, but I do think it has a future. I just don't know how it's going to land. So I'm going to get your insights. You always have some brilliant insights, but yeah, to be determined. We'll have to see how things settle out. But the market's pretty interesting. I don't have a good feel for it, right? So
yeah, I think that's you bring up some good points. I think it is surprising that it hasn't gone up given the macro backdrop and everything that's developing. So I don't know, do you have any thoughts of do you think is overvalued, undervalued, or anything along those lines?
I have no idea, and you can't really trust some of the money managers because obviously they have a stake,
Yeah,
right?
interest. Yeah.
So Michael Saylor's sitting on a big pile. Oh, it's going to be the next thing. You got to get in. What's that lady from Art Capital, Catherine? Somebody. She's talking it up and this and that. I do think they brought up this idea of tokenization, which we had a little chat about. I think that could be the thing that motivates a big rise in at least usage. I don't know if it'll raise the price, but if you do get to a point where you're tokenizing a lot of transactions through the blockchain, it'd be like, wait a minute. And we talk about it because we're in finance. It's like, well, a lot of these finance banking functions can go away, right? If you start to trust them. And then you do have a market for an Ethereum. And one of my friends really knows all about the stuff, but I think Ethereum's value is it's on a certain kind of blockchain, right? So if who knows what the competition for adoption will be, but if there's a certain blockchain that catches on, like people decided Microsoft was the best operating system and Netscape went away kind of thing. If it happens to take off, then that means the value of the coin will increase. And then you have this culture, which my children are familiar with, which I'm kind of lost in, which is you do have an economy in these video games. So these video games are interactive with people talking. There is an economy there. My son doesn't seem to have much academic interest in many things, but he will talk to me as if he were a trader in some of these games. Like he was like, I negotiated this and this guy gave me this and I totally ripped him off and this and that. So I think, as far as like coins go, once you start, to your point, once you start to have a more digital economy, which is more conducive for a digital medium, then it will be taking off. And the interesting thing, at least for this political regime, is they have no interest in making a central bank digital currency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, all bets are off when the next Democrat or the next Republican comes in or independent, because they might say, yes, we demand it, because we know the world is going more towards mass surveillance. And that's the perfect way for mass surveillance, right? They can watch your coins flow. No dollar bills anymore, right? No secret grubby dollar bills being traded in back rooms if everything's digital, right? So I think, it's going to be some role for future currencies, but I haven't quite put my finger on it, So could be totally worthless, or it could be you might be sitting on a pile of money, right?
Yeah.
Like my friend got into it in 2014 or so, and he tells me sometimes like, yeah, I lost a couple of coins, because sometimes you can have a coin on an electronic device, and if the electronic device gets broken or something, it's gone.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he's got all this sophisticated way to keep his coins now, but so it'll be interesting. I don't know what's going to happen, so we'll have to see.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're at time, Andrew. So once again, a successful conversation. I think we've gone through a number of ideas. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 3 months, so we'll have to reconvene. In the meantime, are you interested in the UFO podcast?
The UFO podcast. So what's this?
I've had it in my back pocket for a while, so I haven't done it, but I'm gonna have to go ahead and do the podcast, because I was waiting for some feedback, but people get lost in their other projects. But I'm gonna go ahead and launch that one sooner or later. So you can jump in if you want to.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I'm definitely no expert on UFOs, but I can be a fly on the wall.
Well, a couple of my friends are definitely into it, but I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that one because it's been sitting around for a long time. But if you have an idea for a podcast, let me know. We can definitely go back into some of the themes we just touched upon into greater depth. But there isn't a lack of things to talk about nowadays. I'll just put it that way.
There's so many. Yeah.
There's so many things coming at you from all kinds of angles. So.
Yeah, interesting times.
All right. Well, signing off for the Secret Squirrel Society. Thank you.
Thanks.
Oh, don't leave.
Yeah.